Hey guys, welcome to TST Garage. I'm Bart, and today I will be showing you how to install the TST Industries Elite-1 Fender Eliminator on a Kawasaki Z400. Our Fender Eliminators are available in two different variants. One common part to both variants is our CNC aluminum closeout. This part is responsible for closing out all the holes left behind by the removal of your fender. And beyond that, the two builds diverge in that the simple standard version is just a stamped static bracket that remains in one position. It just gives you the ability to remount your license plate, whereas the nice upgraded adjustable version is all CNC machined aluminum, black anodized, very nice high quality components, and it enables you the adjustability of the final hanging angle of your plate. One thing I want to add here is that should you already have some sort of a swing arm mount for your license plate or some other location, maybe like we've done here on another bike where the license plate hangs really low and you really only want the closeout component, we do have that available on our website in just a closeout form. So if that's the part you're after, you can use our installation instructions here minus the brackets and you'll know how to put that part on. These Fender Eliminators do not come with a license plate light bundled by default because some guys just don't run a license plate light. So for that reason, we do have our low profile license plate light available to you as a buy together module. Anytime you go to one of the offer ads for one of these parts, this is available in a separate menu. You pick that up separately or together, choice is yours. It's a very nice bright unit. It really disappears behind your license plate. It mounts actually in between the license plate and the bracket, and just a small portion of it sticks out, and it has 4 really bright LEDs, provides nice ample lighting for your license plate. An additional point here is that when you replace this big stock factory fender with one of these systems, you're ditching your signaling system in the back. So for that reason, we did come up with a couple different kits for you guys. We do have the BL6 signals, the ARO 18 signals, and also our integrated tail light, which you'll see already mounted on this bike. If you cruise through our website, tstindustries.com, you will see all the different options available to you and some other really cool parts. For the installation part of this video, we will be focusing on the most complicated version, which is the adjustable. If you've purchased the static standard version, it's pretty self-explanatory. You basically clamp the closeout with the static bracket and the hardware against your undertail and cap it off with nuts and washers from the inside. So the installation will be very similar. We won't be going over the simpler version. If you can comprehend this installation, you can do that like a breeze. So one thing before we go and start the disassembly of the original parts, I want to add that on the OEM undertail, you have an area that's raised here that accepts your wires from the OEM fender. This will need to be sliced off if you want to run the closeout. We do have a different version of a Fender Eliminator. We call it just a simple standard. It does mount in this place without any closeout, but it leaves holes for debris to enter and water to enter your motorcycle. So we felt like this was a nicer solution. So we'll be showing you how to install that in this video. Here I have a sample of what we've done to enable the actual mounting of this closeout against the undertail. So you'll see me perform this modification to the bike. If this is beyond the scope of what you want to do, you can consider just getting our simple standard Fender Eliminator, and that'll be that. So, all right, now that I said all that, let's get on the bike and start wrenching. In the first step, we will remove the license plate off the motorcycle and retain the stock license plate hardware. This will be reused on our setup. Then we will access the passenger seat compartment by removing the passenger seat, and then also remove the driver's seat. And now we can start removing some hardware. Okay, so now we will lift up on this trunk cover. I usually take these out and they remain out on my bikes. I don't actually use them, but for this particular installation, we'll just bungee it back to something so it holds in place for us. Now we need to access all the plugs for the electrical equipment on the fender. They are within this rubber boot. Once you expose those plugs, you will notice left and right signal plugs, gray and black, and then one additional plug for the license plate light. License plate light plug. You need to press on this locking mechanism and withdraw it. These guys are a little bit more difficult from this angle, so I like to use a small flathead screwdriver and pry up on the locking mechanism that engages with this ratchet clip, and just pry in, comes back out. Pretty simple stuff. Once that's done, just move the boot away. As you can see here, we have access to these 4 Allen head screws. They will require a 5mm Allen to crack them loose. And I typically remove 3 freely and hold the fender with my hand as I remove the last one. Now we can work the wiring out of the undertail here carefully so we don't rip anything. We'll remove that last fastener. Now we're ready to go to the next step. I just want to make one note here. Sandwiched between the undertail panel and the frame components are these spacers. You need to make sure that they end up in their correct location here, like you see here protruding from the undertail. Otherwise, they may drop into the undertail and down here and fall out. You need to retain these in these locations. So make sure that they always stay in there. If you see one coming up, recenter it, pop it back in, and that'll ensure a proper installation. Okay, now we will need to modify this area. Like I said before, our closeout will not fit over this raised surface. We need to make it look like this. For that purpose, we can use either a Dremel with a cutoff tool or a very sharp blade. For this installation, I will be using a sharp blade like this, and also helping myself with a straight edge so I don't run off. I will score the seaming surfaces and then try to work it through. Probably take a little bit of time, but if we have some patience, we could get a good end result here. Okay, so now we're actually going to start assembling these components onto the bike. Our adjustable kit shows up with these 2 machined components, a baggie of hardware, along with some additional machined components. We have our hinge bosses and also L brackets, and then some hardware that will mount all that stuff together. The other baggie that shows up is responsible for providing the hardware for our closeout to actually mount to the bike, and also provides a countersunk screw that is used for blanking out this hole here, along with a nylock nut that screws onto the other side of this fastener connection. This particular screw blanks out this hole in case you're not going to run any wires through. If you're running a license plate light on your setup, or perhaps signals and license plate light, then you would leave this hole open. For our purpose in this installation, we will close it up. We can always open it back up if we're going to run a license plate light, which we will, but that's a separate video you can find on our YouTube channel. So now this thing will be able to get on here and get clamped down. So these hinge bosses will end up living down here under these rear holes, and they are threaded in here. You will find the longer M6 screw along with the larger washer. Feed that through. This will go through the top into the rearmost holes and protrude through here, just like that. We've provided you with 2 of these, like that. This closeout goes over these screws, and then our hinge bosses will get screwed on here. This is sort of an essential part here that I'm going to tell you right now. You will need a little bit of Loctite or some sort of medium strength thread locking compound. There's a lot of vibration in the rear section of this bike. You do want to lock the threads down, and we were not able to design in a nylock component into these parts here. There's just no way to machine that in, so we advise you to use a medium strength locking compound. So we'll get that on like that. Get one of these hinge bosses started on the thread here. We won't bottom that out. Do not want to keep turning this past the point of contact with the closeout, because you'll scratch up the closeout. So as you can see here, there is a swooping geometry to the design of this hinge. This part will go towards the rear behind the bike, so it'll sort of swoop to the rear. And that is the configuration we want to leave this screwed in. I'm going to do the other screw with our locking compound. Repeat the procedure. All right, now I'm going to take a 3mm Allen key, put it through these 2 hinge bosses. I'm going to grab a 10mm box wrench that will be used for manipulating these hinge bosses from the rear here. And I'm going to use a 4mm Allen from the top on those screws that we just initiated into these hinges. And the purpose of having this box wrench here is to align these hinge bosses parallel to the center plane of the bike. You want to make sure that that is as close as you could possibly make it to that center plane, because that will enable a proper hinge action for the L brackets that hold the license plate bracket. Now, before you tighten that all down, I would advise that you check that your closeout is in fact center and aligned to your liking, and I have that here. I'll lock this connection down fully, making sure that, again, these hinges are parallel to the center plane of the bike. And we're good here. Allen key comes out, and now we can attach our L brackets here. So as you can see, they are bent on an angle to enable fitting of your license plate bracket. They will need to get attached to the bike in this configuration, sloping from forward top to bottom rear. And for this bolted connection, we will use the smaller M6 screws along with the smaller washers. Again, using some medium strength thread locking compound. Just wet the threads a little bit. I don't want to put too much of that stuff in there. And these L brackets actually have a hole here that is the size of the shoulder coming out of the hinge here. So we want to make sure that that's concentric. They interlock that way, and they ensure proper hinge action. This will require a 4mm Allen. We'll just bottom that out, making sure it's concentric. We don't have to tighten it just yet. We'll do that at the very end. We'll repeat the procedure on this side. And if your L brackets are parallel faced now, you can get this license plate bracket mounted on. As you can see, you have 3 holes on either side. This enables us to mount these on many different configurations. For this particular bike, the spacing that we will use is our innermost holes. We provided countersunk screws for that connection, and these screws on the other side receive a nylock locking nut, so these particular connections do not require thread locking agent. These will simply turn on and the nylon element in the nut will lock the threads. We'll be using a 3mm Allen on these connections. And then from the other side on the nut, we'll require an 8mm box wrench, or open-ended, whatever you have available. I like these ratcheting guys because I can just continuously turn it in. I like to leave that stuff all pretty loose in the beginning. I go over the whole assembly at the very end, make sure everything's center, aligned, and to my liking. And now I will progressively tighten everything down. Final adjustment here of the hinge mechanism should be made with the license plate already on. So that's what I'll do now. And now, as you can see, we have a range of adjustment. It is not very practical in this configuration, as the suspension action can actually bump into the license plate, so you definitely want it out of the way of that. I think I like this angle best. I will lock these hinges down, making sure I use enough torque so that it doesn't back out. So that's pretty much it for this installation. I will just go in the reverse order of disassembly here with the seats, but that's essentially it. It's pretty simple, as you guys can see. If you've opted for the standard non-adjustable version, just wanted to quickly illustrate the flow of the assembly. Obviously, your closeout goes against the undertail, and this bracket goes against the closeout. Then you have a pair of small washers and the provided screws, and that goes through the rearmost holes in the undertail. And then you drop one of these washers on top over the whole assembly, and then lock it down with a nylock nut. I just wanted to show you guys in case you bought this and not this. It's really simple. You can just apply most of the steps with the addition of this note, and you'll be successful in installing this standard bracket. All right, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna reinstall these parts and then we'll be done. And we are done. So you can see it took about 15 minutes and created a really nice effect back here. We took off the shovel-like OEM fender and the big signals and replaced that with a nice low profile setup that is very minimal and makes the whole bike very, very sleek. Here you see our integrated taillight mounted. I don't have it hooked up yet. We're opting for the integrated taillight for the signaling components on this bike. However, we do offer pod signals that you could run instead of the OEM pod signals. You could also run the pod signals with the taillight via the use of our integration harness that we have on our website. Should you choose to check out our website, it's tstindustries.com. We have a whole host of cool products for this bike. I know it's still early. This bike just launched, but we already have a whole lineup, and we're adding new stuff pretty much every week. So hope to see you at tstindustries.com, and I hope you guys will check out our other videos on this bike. See ya.